What's going on, team? Proof here, and welcome to my deck guide series for Overdressed Set 1, Genesis of the 5 Greats. And instead of presenting a deck list and talking about it and then going into replays like I normally do, I'm going to do things a little bit differently this time. So I'm going to start with talking about the ride deck and then going over the overall goal of what it's accomplishing. And then after that, I'm going to talk about 3 key cards that are either important for the deck's function or cards that you want to look for in your hand post mulligan. After that, I'm going to go into the general overview of the deck. And then since this is more of a general overview, I want you to keep in mind that the gameplay of the deck can change depending on the matchups. And then I'm going to give a couple pros and cons. And finally, we'll finish things up with a sample deck to tie everything together. So I hope you stick around and I hope you enjoy. And for this video, we got Eugene. So let's go ahead and hop into it. So Eugene's ride deck, the entire goal of his ride deck is to get you to 5 soul as soon as you get to your Eugene on grade 3. That way you're ready to fire off with Eugene's Soul Blast 5 skill. Because Nigel, when he's written on by Randor, gets you a soul charge. And then when Eugene rides on Randor, you also get an additional soul charge. So by the time you get up to grade 3, you'll have exactly 5 cards in soul. That way you don't have to use Randor's Counterblast 1 ability if you don't want to, but you have the ability to do so. That way you can hit over your opponent, maybe wanting to no pass your 10k Vanguard. So the extra 5k makes a big difference there. You also get a nice little draw, which is a nice little bonus there from Randor. And then Nigel makes a nice combo with Eugene because you can rest him to retire for Eugene's rest 2 skill. And then you can retire Randor for his own ability to open up the circle on both sides and give you an extra circle to top check and another spot that's open for you to call to as well. As for the key cards, we have Tribash, Oshikuni, and Shigamanago. And the reason I pick out these 3 cards in particular is because Oshikuni and Tribash, they operate in the space where it kind of makes your opponent consider putting more rear guards on the board to lock out their skills. And by doing so, it kind of plays into your hand of picking off their pieces. And Tribash really gives you a lot of pressure for Eugene because it can attack into your opponent's Vanguard or into a rear guard with his nice 13k body. And then you can absorb into the soul, which feeds into Eugene's Soul Blast 5 skill for the future. And it gives you nice crit pressure as well, which really makes it like a thorn in the side for the opponent. And Oshikuni getting +5 for the same condition really allows you to have a nice tempo and aggression piece there. And it's something that I think is an important thing to consider when you're playing Eugene, is to have at least some form of power, and Oshikuni really gives you that there. Shigamanago allows you to be a nice rest piece for Eugene's retire skill, and then it can immediately for free replace itself with your top call. And at worst, it goes into the soul. So then that way you can maybe, if you're at 4 soul, for example, you can use Shigamanago to put the card into the soul. And then you can Soul Blast 5 for Eugene and check top however many circles you have available on your opponent's side and put those pieces on the board instead of just the 1. So it's a nice way to facilitate Eugene. As for Eugene's overall game plan, in my opinion, you want to flood the board early and kind of force your opponent to match your aggression, and then from there you can start picking off their units and you can make a new board off of Eugene's skills. So you kind of make it awkward for your opponent to try to lock out your skills. You pick off their pieces, build a new board, and then you try to beat them down that way. So you kind of play a mid-rangey game, kind of play rushing in the beginning and then board control a little bit more in the mid game once you get to Eugene, and try to last that way. The pros for Eugene: it has really efficient retire. Eugene himself is free just by resting 2 rear guards. Nigel can combo up there. Any other retired piece that you have can almost freely be used if they use Counterblast, because Eugene doesn't use a whole lot of Counterblast himself. So it allows you to have like nice efficient retire, and kind of really feeds into that try to burn out your opponent's resources game plan while you're being aggressive. And another pro that I kind of touched on with Oshikuni and Tribash is that your opponent playing cards tries to lock them out of those skills, but also gives you more pieces to pick off from your opponent and reduces their hand size as well. But then by not doing that, it makes Tribash and Oshikuni and other cards with those conditions much more of a threat. And then the cons: that your top calls are pretty much prey to RNG. So if you see a whole bunch of triggers pop up on your top calls, your board gets weaker. But then if you see more actionable cards, then your board gets better. So it kind of falls to that RNG element there. And then the last con for Eugene, that he has a tough time finishing games, because outside of Oshikuni and Persona Ride power, you really don't get a whole lot of power through your other cards. So you kind of are attacking with maybe 23 here or 18k here or 13k because you gave up the boosters for Eugene. So it kind of has a tough time finishing games. So that'll do it for the overview. Let's go ahead and get to the sample deck. And we've actually talked about the vast majority of what's in the sample deck here, but there are a few things I wanted to touch on. Tension Steed is useful in Eugene because the deck doesn't use a ton of counterblast with the setup that I have, so it gives you another layer of pressure. And C helps you get Eugenes to hand before you call them out or put them in the soul via Eugene's call skill. Sunlight Punishment exists in the same vein as Tension Steed because you may have some excess CB that you can use to help clear up your opponent's board, especially with the help of Eugene's skill. And I'm sure you know that there's a lot of grade 1s in the deck, and that's to help give you the ability to be aggressive going second, because it puts your opponent in a really tough spot whether to pick off units or push damage, while Eugene can just rebuild it without the counterblast. So if your opponent spends time picking off your rear guards as opposed to pushing damage, then it really puts you ahead on tempo. And you're free to tinker with the ratios that I have here once you get a feel for what you value and what you don't in the deck. As for the triggers, we got 8 crit, 3 draw, 4 heal, and 1 drag beta. And I put in less draws here because I thought it wasn't necessary with Eugene's ability to continue to call things for free. So you can fill up your board with stuff and then really put the pressure on your opponent. And especially when you have Tri-Bash in here, that can already give your Vanguard a crit. Sometimes you might just sneak out a win because Eugene is attacking for 2 damage already, and then you check a crit and then you hit him for 3 out of nowhere. So that'll do it for the deck guide on Eugene. I really hope you enjoy, and I'll catch you next time. Peace. Be easy.